Welcome back to this tutorial. So in this tutorial we are going to talk about variables. So in variables are containers for storing data values, all right? So how do we actually create variables in Python? A variable is created in Python when you actually assign a value to it. Okay, for instance, we want to assign a value to x. We say x equal say 5. Okay, um let's say z equal um John Doe. Okay, all right, so let's print x. Okay, that should be in a parenthesis. Print x. You see, we can see an output of 5 on the screen. All right, so you can now see that the x actually stored this value 5. So immediately you called the variable x in the print command. It actually printed out 5. So if we want to print John Doe, we can just say print z. Okay, you can see now John Doe. All right, so that's it about variables. Variables do not need to be declared with any particular type. In the last tutorial, we talked about the type of data, which is float, integer, and string. And you should also take note that variables can even change type after they have been set. Okay, for instance, x equals to 5 is of the type integer, and x, if we come down here and declare another variable, we declare the same variable x again, and we now bring in our quotation sign. We just call it Savio. Okay, that's a popular name around here. Okay, now in our previous tutorial, I made you understand that anytime that you bring in this quotation signs, okay, this quotation sign, it means that you are dealing with a string. So if we should run this, okay, before we run that, let's change that to x so that you can now see what we are talking about here. X. So if we run that, you now see that x is now savior. It's no more the integer 4 again. So if we want to check the type, if you want to actually check the type of the variable x, now you can just come here and just type in type. Okay, and don't forget to also close this parenthesis. So it now tell you that x is now a string compared to earlier, in which, if you notice, when we first declared x here, we declared it at x equals to 5. 5 is an integer from the data type that we talked about in the previous tutorial. If you have not watched the previous tutorial, just go and check for tutorial 2. We will put the link in the description. So that's how you check the type of a variable. So, but if we declare a variable and we just want to specify the type, okay, if you want to specify the type, okay, we know that we have actually declared x to be 5 before. Let's declare it again 89. Okay, and we want to specify this to be a string even though it's an integer. So what do? We just come here and bring in str to indicate string, and it puts enclose 89 in a parenthesis. So now if we now check the type of x, now we can now see that regardless of the fact that x x should be a, since it's a number, x should have been an integer, but we now specified a string to it, and now when we now run the program and check the type, we now see that it's now a string. So that's how you change a string, an integer, to a string. What if we want to change 89 to a decimal, which is float? Okay, so let's first of all print x so that you see what comes up on the output. Print x before we check the type. Okay, so let's print x. As you can see, x now is 89.0. It's now a floating point decimal. You can see 89.0, and the class is what? Is a float. Okay, I just hope you get the idea of what we are trying to say. All right, so that's basically how to check the type. And one other thing you should take note while declaring a variable is, if you wish to declare a variable that is a string, and we don't necessarily need to actually say don't necessarily need to actually bring in the word string. Okay, we can just declare it this way: x equals to, we bring in a double quote or a single quote, and you enclose that. Okay, so you can now see 45 is now the class of a string. Okay, let's put a single quotes there so that you see it's the same thing. We can use single quotes or double quotes in Python, and look at that, x equals to 45, and it's as well a string. Okay, so string variables can be declared by using a single or double quotes, as we've seen there. Let's also look at another thing you should take note while declaring a variable. Variables are case sensitive. Okay, if you are using a small letter in declaring, that means you should expect to print still using the small letter. If I now try to put in a capital letter X here, and I now put a capital letter X here, and now run this code, you see that you see what comes out of the output here if the name X is not defined. All right, so to solve that problem, you have to actually declare this as a capital letter X, not a small letter x. All right, so here we come down here and say x equal still that 45, and now when you do that, you can now print x, and you can now check the class of x to be string. All right, variables are case sensitive. Okay, take note of that. So I think that's where we will stop for today's tutorials on variable. But before we actually um, end this tutorial, let's actually have some fun, a little bit fun with what we can actually do with variable. All right. Okay. So while using variable, all right, while declaring variables, you can actually make use of, you can actually concatenate variables, all right. You can actually concatenate variables. This is what I mean. Okay, this concatenate. Okay, this basically means you can join one or two variables together after you must have declared them, all right. So this is quite unlike Java, which concatenating numbers with string without declaring number as a string. Whereas while declaring variables in Python, it requires declaring the number as a string, otherwise it will show you an error. So for instance, let's say we declared x as age of a student, and we declared z to be 20. Okay, and we now decided to print, to concatenate it, that's to join them together and output it on our screen. So we came down and said print. Hey, I'm using this. Came down and said print x plus z. Okay, so if we do that, we can see age 20. All right, so it actually, we were able to run that program. But if we now try to make z an integer and we try to run this code, you can see that it says can only concatenate string, not integer. All right, so if you wish to concatenate, you must you have to make sure that both of them are are strings data type. Once the integer is declared as string, it can concatenate both x and z in the output. Okay, so concatenation actually just means I'm joining together the variables. So that's a very interesting part that we can do with Python here. So just to make this a little bit, make it look nice a little bit, we make a space after the h. So if you wanted to output your h is welcome, your h is 20. You see there, we can actually do that by concatenation of variable. All right, okay, so that's it for variable today, and we will still looking more, we will still dive deep into the variables in our next tutorial. We will see how you can receive inputs from a user and store it as a variable and display it when the user wants to access that information. So thank you for joining this tutorial. I hope to see you in the next tutorial. All right.